I'm gonna be honest here. Don't be surprised if you see more videos like this with a similar looking title. What can I say? For some reason, I hate trying new things. I'm just kinda joking with that. You see, I am quite into trying new games, manga, and anime. At least I'd like to think I am. However, in regards to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it's quite mixed in terms of how often the average casual anime watcher can get into this series. I often consider myself an avid fan of both anime and manga, as both are forms of media I love to consume in my free time. However, there are still gems I've yet to consume, and one of them, as of around 9 months ago, had been JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Up until that point, many had referred to me as your local resident JoJo hater. Me being a naive 21-year-old, I couldn't help but meme my distaste for the series despite having never seen a single episode. You could call it toxic traits because of social media like Twitter, but regardless, those are my unfortunate origins. However, little did I know that one day, all it took was a trip to my friend's house that would change my mind. That trip which led to this whole series becoming tied for my #1 favorite anime and manga of all time. I want to talk about every part of JoJo up to part 8. I won't be going too deep into it as I genuinely really want to go into each part, but I'd rather make separate videos about them so I can go in depth analyzing the storytelling of each part and not have to worry about an 8-hour long video. You see, I have this friend, surprising I know, who in this situation we'll just call Joseph. Joseph really enjoys JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. However, he knew I found it extremely weird and uninteresting purely based off of out of context Twitter posts and GIFs. So one day, we were just chilling at his house and I had already been over there for most of the day, so I decided I'd head back home and work on some videos. However, when I attempted to leave, he shot up and locked the door and told me I was not leaving. And yes, just as it sounds, I was indeed creeped out. He explained to me I'm not leaving until I try JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Initially, I was completely against the idea and I attempted to leave again, but as you could guess, I really couldn't leave without one of us having to square off. So I just said screw it, and in the end, I just wanted to get home, and if 23 minutes of my time is all it took, then so be it. Needless to say, I was quite captivated by the show. We started with Phantom Blood, commonly referred to as part 1, and we ended up watching most of it till around episode 7, and then I was eager to get home and finish watching the rest of it, which of course I did. I really enjoyed Jonathan Joestar as a protagonist, even though looking back, he was quite bland compared to what's to come. JoJo's Part 2, Battle Tendency, is where things really started kicking off for me. Though it felt odd to me that JoJo's was now going to have different protagonists, as the ending of Part 1 kinda made that set in stone, Joseph, the previous protagonist's grandson, was the polar opposite of Jonathan. He was rude and crass and quicker to violence if someone angered him. But what made him so charismatic was his humorous side. No matter the situation, Joseph always had quirks that would let the viewer feel everything was going to be okay. Whether it was him clowning on the enemy, predicting what they'd say and do, and then when they actually follow through with it, it completely throws them off guard, or when his answer to a current problem is the exact opposite of what the average shonen protagonist would do. The Joestar family's secret technique, running away. It's hilarious and it's hard to not hold back laughter when he's on screen. This isn't to say Joseph is all laughs, as Battle Tendency isn't all sunshine and rainbows. There are times when things get tense. There are times when you want to cry and you can feel what the characters feel. When you see a guy like Joseph cry, it arguably hits different than when other shonen protagonists cry, primarily because many manga authors try to make it known that their main characters have a sensitive side, which is a case that makes them feel more real and relatable. But Joseph here isn't really an emotional person. Well, in terms of that emotion being sadness. We know Joseph is well acquainted with his annoyed and angry side, but I think that's why it makes seeing Joseph cry hurt so badly, because it's something we've never really seen him do. This guy we love, who's always thrown us for a loop, surprise us, makes us laugh, is now appearing scarred and broken. Thankfully, it doesn't keep him down for good, but it definitely had a scene that really added more depth to his character, which up to this point had made him my favorite character in this series so far, which honestly wouldn't change even going into part 3, Stardust Crusaders. This, to many people, is where JoJo's Bizarre Adventure actually begins. For me, this part was already feeling a bit alienating for a few reasons. One, I had known stands were a thing for a while now, but didn't really understand what they were and what they could do. So seeing them here was a bit jarring at first, and at the same time, I was sad to see Hamon take a back seat in this situation. Secondly, Jotaro here is a completely different protagonist than Jonathan and Joseph. While both being acquainted with violence in some form or fashion, both of them did it for their own reasons. Jonathan had to stop his vampire brother from destroying humanity, and Joseph had to stop an ancient race of superhumans from destroying civilization as we know it. But even while dealing with that, they were honest to God, respectable to those they love and cared for. But Jotaro here, the first thing he does is swear at his own mother. Not a good first impression for me whatsoever, especially coming from two protagonists who wouldn't dream of speaking that way to their dear family. Now, unlike part 1 and 2, part 3 is actually split up into 2 separate seasons, one being Stardust Crusaders and the other one being Stardust Crusaders Battle in Egypt, as the point of this whole part is that a familiar villainous face has reappeared and many years have passed, and some people have begun gaining powers of strange entities residing within themselves. Though it's explained differently by different people throughout this series, a basic way to explain them are physical manifestations of a person's fighting spirit. They can take many different forms and have many different abilities, but all usually derive from the strength of a person's spirit. And in this part, Jojos changes forever, as every part after this uses this concept as the primary way of fighting, and it's woven through its storytelling. Even though I love the introduction of stands now, and they get even more interesting going forward, I just feel now that part 3 did not need to have 2 seasons. One season they're traveling across the world to Egypt to fight the main villain, while the second season is dang near solely about going across the street to his house and fighting him. It just felt way too drawn out, even if some of the fights in the second season were really cool and interesting and honestly made it worth it in the end. I still just couldn't help but feeling they really didn't need to make this a whole second season. Now, in terms of the anime, I'll say this now. This is my favorite part that's been animated. Everything from the storytelling and in-depth looking into the main villain's life to the concept of who the main character is. It's cool to see some years have passed since part 3, and Jotaro is a lot older now and is looked up to as a reliable and wise figure, even though he isn't the protagonist here. Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, is a very different part than all others so far. It's added more slice of life into the mix. We get to see Josuke, our main character, go to school, hang out with friends, and see this world through a high schooler's point of view. Even though all the previous main characters were young too, we just never really got to see into those parts of their lives really. Our main villain is a serial killer who not only has been at it for years and has never gotten caught, but also has a strange fascination with hands. But I think where Diamond is Unbreakable really did well was basically splitting its one season into 2 halves. The first half is exploring Josuke and his friends alongside their abilities and the other stand users they meet, and the second half exploring the daily life of Yoshikage Kira, our main villain and local resident handlover. We've yet to actually see something like this before part 4. In a way, it kind of puts us in a similar situation as Death Note does. The main character is actually the bad guy, and you're morally supposed to want them to lose and justice to be served, but after spending so much time with them, you start kind of not wanting them to be killed off or to see them lose in any way. And I kind of thought adding this depth to a main villain in Jojos was absolutely astounding. It definitely made the final battle more intense and made me more scared to see the results of what everyone has worked towards this whole season, primarily because for the first time, we actually got to see things through the villain's eyes as well. So we've gotten to know everybody on a more personal level. All right, everyone who's seeing me for the first time, this is where we're going to get a bit controversial. I think this was a weaker part for me personally. As of talking about this now, I've only actually seen part 5 Golden Wind one time all the way through, and I have started a rewatch, but as of right now, I still feel Golden Wind was weaker in my eyes in terms of characters, as this is the first time I felt like the main character wasn't really the main character. And also in a way, it's the first part that actually felt like a shonen anime. The anime set up Giorno Giovanna and the seeds planted around his origins earlier on, but they never actually explore these specific things about him really. I know in terms of story, it's not really important as it doesn't really relate to Giorno's overall goals in Golden Wind, but more character exploration in this aspect would have been really nice. And yes, I know he had his own childhood explored later on, but as a main character and knowing what he technically is, it still leaves more to be desired. If anything, I feel this part is carried by our Joe bro Bruno, as he really feels like the main character here. A lot of fights focus on him and he's arguably the most important character narratively. I also felt that though Giorno's ambitions were phenomenal and I loved his ideals, because of what happens in the end, it kind of feels unrewarding, as some people I wanted to be there in the end weren't. And I'm still sad about that, don't judge me. And even though I say that again, I felt that the main cast here was very lacking in my eyes. All of them get their time to shine throughout this part and have their pasts explored, but this isn't really what I'm referring to. Individually, all these characters are fine, great in fact, but I feel they work better individually than they do together, as their interactions together are, in my opinion, what hold it back. Even though they joke around and even bust out some moves together at times, above everything else, the way they talked and interacted with each other in many episodes felt like Araki was prioritizing these guys being comrades over being friends. And even with that being the case, that's okay. It's just not what I personally prefer, as I know it's possible to have a well-balanced feeling of both. But here I feel the comrade side outweighs the friend side of things. Okay, so here's where we get into the manga side of things. I have indeed gone ahead and read up through part 8, Jojo Liar. So any anime only watchers here, I did want to let it be known, I won't be saying any spoilers. I'll bring up some people's names, but I won't be spoiling the plot beyond saying a Netflix type description whatsoever, as I only really want to give my thoughts on the part here and not an overall in-depth analysis or anything, because as I said before, I'll go in depth about the story more in their own individual videos. But for now, let's keep moving. Part 6, Stone Ocean. This part hits differently for me, mainly because this part actually takes place in Florida, which is where I was born and raised. And no, the average Florida man does not just drink beer and wrestle gators all day, that's only on Wednesdays. Seeing a place I'm so familiar with being the stage for Jojos was really interesting to me, even more so the main character Jolin being the daughter of a previous protagonist in the series. It not only sets a solid foundation for her character, but it also creates expectations for how her character will act and grow. I won't lie, at first I kind of felt Araki was just trying to make the statement that yeah, the main character's a girl this time. But boy, let me tell you, I was so wrong. That's one thing about agendas in media nowadays. A lot of times when people want to make a statement in something they make, whether it's a game, a movie, or a book even, they always try to make that statement front and center and the overall selling point of that media. And honestly, that not only drives a ton of people away at this point in time, but also limits the type of storytelling you can do. I realized as I read further, seeing all that Jolin and her friends had gone up against this whole time, that Araki wasn't trying to make a statement about Jolin and her being a woman protagonist. He simply wanted to tell a story, and the girl just happened to be the center of it. There was no point where I felt going forward that Araki was trying to tell me that only women could do this, or she did all these things because women power, or anything along those lines. Jolin is an amazingly strong and well-written character, and I am so excited to see her in the anime one day. And I know one of the biggest draws to part 6 is the ending, but we'll get to that in its own video. But going forward to part 7 and 8 now, it's important to note that these stories take place in a completely alternative timeline. So everything that's happened in JoJo's before these parts are null and void. Don't even think about them going forward from here. Now, let's get on to part 7, Steel Ball Run. And I'm sure many have already heard about this part. This is widely acknowledged as the best part of JoJo's in its entirety. And honestly, I couldn't agree more. I'd go even as far to say, part 7 of JoJo's makes the entire series worth experiencing. I really did love every part of JoJo's, of course, but man, oh man, Steel Ball Run is a cut above the rest. It follows the American Johnny Joestar and his adventure with Gyro Zeppeli as they voyage across the United States competing in the National Steel Ball Run, a horseback race from one end of the country to the other. But this isn't the only thing that makes it exciting. Johnny as a main character mirrors Jonathan in quite a few ways. They both may be a John Joestar, but he's got the personality of both Jonathan and Joseph to a degree. And in all honesty, I'd even go as far to say he has a glimmer of Dio in some moments. And by that I mainly mean when something happens, he shows that same spark of malice. It was cool to see his past and how he ended up having to live the way he does now, and seeing how much he's changed as a person over the years to being who he is now. He's not perfect by any means, but I feel that's what makes him really interesting. He's got a natural disadvantage over everyone else around him, and I feel it makes him relatable. Even if we're not really in his shoes, sometimes in life emotionally we feel like we are. And don't even get me started on Gyro. I thought Araki couldn't top Bruno as a Jobro, but man, Gyro blows Bruno out of the water here. Not only is he one of the most likable people in this whole series by coming down to our level and just being a bro to share a laugh with, he's also shown his traits as a mentor, a friend, and a brother. What it means to be a son, dealing with the expectations of others. It makes us feel for him and wanting to see him succeed in everything he goes up against. And now for one of my favorite parts of Steel Ball Run, the main villain. I won't say their name, but they are undeniably my favorite villain in the whole series. No one comes close, honestly. Not only is his stand freaking insane, but the way he speaks to everyone, showing how charismatic he is and how just his actions can seem on the surface really just shows not only is he a genius, but he's the type of villain who doesn't even realize how evil he is. You can argue he's relatively not that evil compared to other villains, as he has goals and inspirational aspirations. The things you do to reach those goals are wildly important. The main objective and the thing he needed to achieve it, the fact that he'd be willing to exploit this object with no sense of morality is honestly horrifying. And seeing what he's willing to do to people that get in his way, man, his stand is horrifying. Again, I won't go too into it, but that power is downright terrifying. I couldn't begin to explain how mind-bendingly shook I'd be if that been done to me, or if I'd seen it happen to someone else in real life. Please, if you have not yet watched past part 5, please do yourself a favor and read part 6 and 7. They are so ultimately worth your time. And finally, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 8, Jojo Liar, is the current and most recent part of JoJo's. This will be a bit different as this part isn't actually done yet, but I'll speak on it just a bit as I'd rather save my full thoughts for when the part is actually done, and I can fully consider this the adventure as a whole. But Jojo Liar is definitely the strangest part as JoJo. I'd so far as to say it puts the bizarre in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and still does not even prove it enough. Now, even with that fact being known, Jojo Liar takes us back to a familiar town with a familiar radio station from a previous part. But the town isn't the same as we remember, as again, this is an alternate timeline now. This town is much, much darker now. Honestly, despite how weird things are in this part, this is also undeniably the darkest and most mature part of the series. Araki definitely turned it up to 11 with this, and I can honestly see some parts getting changed for an anime adaptation down the line. However, this didn't stop me from being captivated in the mystery marinating in this town. There are tons of questions throughout this entire part that the main cast are constantly hunting the answers for. Our main character, Josuke, yes Josuke, but not Josuke, you still with me? Josuke has amnesia and knows nothing about his life before his soon-to-be bestie Yasuo finds him near the new strange structures appearing around the town. Now it's up to them to discover the mysteries of the town while constantly being targeted by the main group of villains in this part, who are simply known as the Rock Humans, who again aren't all as they seem. But as far as part 8 goes, and considering this part isn't done yet, I'm excited to see how Araki wraps up this part and sees the answers that as a reader, I have been yearning for. I only hope that it sets everything straight, is well thought out, and well delivered, and ends in a way that leaves me dwelling on things long after I put the book down. But yeah, that was my general look at my adventure through JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, a series that I never once considered giving the time of day before that visit to my friend's house. And hey man, I know you're watching this, so from the bottom of my heart, thanks for trapping me in your room that day. I had a really great time, and I definitely could have worded that better. Hey everyone, thanks for making it to the end. I loved making this, and I have so much more JoJo stuff I want to talk about as well. So if you're into the series, definitely leave me a like to show you're interested, and subscribe with the bell's notifications turned on if you're excited for the individual parts. I'm probably going to do part 7 first, by the way, because I really love Steel Ball Run, and these may not go in order. Okay, bye.